Hello there, I am Angie.
I am Alejandra.
And welcome to our analysis of Dracula by Bram Stoker. First of all, we want to show you our books. This is mine. This is from Albor Libros, and this is from 2018. As you can see, in the cover, there are some wolves, and also there is the word Dracula with some blood here, and it's red. For me, at the beginning, it was like kind of contradictory because, like wolves and Dracula, like vampires and wolves at the same time in the same book. But I can see that both legends are mixed in this book, and I really like that. Even though it was like shocking at the beginning, but it is cool now.
Okay, so these are my books. The first one, this is from Iber Libros from 2017, and I found this cover fascinating because of its color. Because red color obviously reminds me of blood and vampires, but also the golden letters and lines can be a reference to the Victorian era in which the book was written. Also I have this edition that is from Penguin Random House from 2018. I find this fascinating as well, since it doesn't have the title anywhere, but it has some phrases here. So, for example, the first one, it says, "The blood is the life." There is another quote that says, "Have you felt the vampire's lips upon your throat?" So I really find this quote completely accurate for our presentation today, because we are going to approach this book from a different theory or perspective, and you'll see that this quote is completely about the theory. So I hope you enjoy this, and this is a really interesting analysis. So I think we can start. Well, of course, before starting talking about the analysis of the book, it is important to talk about the author. So I'm going to read a little part of his biography that is in this edition. It says that Abraham Stoker was born in Dublin on 1847. He graduated in mathematics, and then he worked as a civil servant. Later, he got married and he moved to London, where he became a writer, and he wrote some amazing novels, such as The Snake's Pass, The Jewel of Seven Stars, and The Lair of the White Ward. And of course, he wrote Dracula, that is the novel that we are going to approach in today's analysis.
Yeah, thank you so much, Aleja. So to begin with, we are going to tell you our thesis statement. This is the one that guides our whole analysis. And it says, Bram Stoker portrays how gender and sexuality issue appears through Dracula's main characters, illustrating some fears and traditions from the Victorian era in England. So this is our thesis, but of course we are going to see some context that is very important. Of course, it's not the core of our analysis, but it's important to understand the novel and to understand why Bram Stoker wrote this.
Well, to start with this context, it is relevant to mention that Dracula is a Gothic novel, and Gothic novels or Gothic literature can be defined as a writing that employs dark and picturesque scenery, also that use melodramatic narrative devices, and an overall of an atmosphere of exoticism, mystery, fear, and dread. Also, Gothic novels usually revolve or are settled around large, big old houses, or in this case, a castle that conceals a terrible secret or that serve as a refugee of a frightening creature, as in this case we have the castle of Dracula. Also, Gothic novels usually have some supernatural elements, touches of romance, historical characters, and often they use travel and adventure to show that this is also possible in gothic narrative, and well, to entertain the readers. And we are going to see all these elements in Dracula.
Okay, so besides that, Dracula is a book written in the Victorian era, as Aleja mentioned. So we have to understand what was this period. This was the period of Queen Victoria, and it is also called the Golden Period in British history because of its huge advance in terms of industrialization, communication, and scientific things. For example, in that time, Britain became industrialized, so it means that they were producing a lot of machines and things that really helped them to their work. And also, it was an improvement of communication and transport because they changed a little bit the communication. For example, they started using letters and phonographs and things like that. And as I mentioned, there is a scientific progress, so we can see there were the fight of the century because it was science versus religion. And as I mentioned, this is not the core of our analysis, but it is very important to know and to see how Bram Stoker portrays all of these features of the Victorian era into his book, and how he play a little bit with the characters, and well, talking about this and gender and sexuality.
Okay, so as Angie was mentioning, Bram Stoker completely portrays Victorian era in Dracula, and this is seen, for example, in the use of the epistolary novel. This is when a novel is told through the medium of letters, written by one of maybe by more of the characters of the book. And this happens in Dracula, portraying the Victorian era. Moreover, we see a change in the traditional women. Because, well, we are going to talk later about the new women, about Victorian feminism, and how this is portrayed in the book and in the characters. And finally, we have also the duality between science and superstition, because we are going to find some characters that are scientifics, that are doctors, and they have to face the superstition itself that is portrayed in Dracula, because Dracula is something that it maybe shouldn't exist, or that they didn't expect to meet, and they have to face this superstition through science.
Okay, and also we have to know who was Blood Tapes. If you don't know, Bram Stoker based his whole novel on a character that is real. He was the Prince of Wallachia, and he was the ruler of Wallachia at various times from 1456 and 1462. So this Prince of Wallachia showed some pessimistic view of life when his father sent him to Constantinople, because he learned the Turkish method of impalement on stakes. So we can see that also now when we talk about vampires and how we can kill them through stakes and all of those things. And if you want to see a very good movie about him, about this real character, you can see Dracula Untold. And we are going to show you a little fragment of that movie for you to see the thing of the impalement.
Pennsylvania to rule in peace. His subjects called him Prince. I called him Father. But the world would come to know him as Dracula.
Well, now that we have this overall context about the book, we are going to approach the theory that is going to guide our analysis. So this is, as you can see, the gender and sexuality theory. So to begin with, we are going to approach the main concepts to understand this theory. So first we have subjectivity. According to Foucault, this is a philosophical term that describes a possibility for living experiences, but with larger historical and political context. So here the subject is not simply a synonym of a person, but this term captures a whole more. This captures the possibility of being certain kind of person. Yes, so this is what lead us to the concept of identity, that according to John Locke is something unique or something autonomous. But according to Nietzsche, he sees the subject or the identity itself as multiplicity. So this basically means that all selves are constituted by multiple ethical orders or philosophical conflicts, also psychological conflicts as well. And well, the role of the identity is to make these conflicts manageable and coherent for us. And finally, we have the conception of gender, because, well, this term is very, very important for our analysis. And this term is not only related to biological differences between male and female sets, but this is a collective name for the classification of men and women according to their values, beliefs, conventions, maybe their social roles, their expectations. So usually these expectations are shaped or determined by culture or by our society. They also are fits in laws. So gender is something that, well, follows or tends to follow the society rules, but we are going to see a different approach of gender since Dracula in the Victorian era. And well, we are going to also approach the theory of Freud, but we are going to do that when we are talking about the characters of the book.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Aleja. So also to understand like this thing that Aleja was mentioning about Dracula and how how Bram Stoker portrays like this gender and sexuality issue, we have to see first how was gender and sexuality during the Victorian age. So in here we have the traditional gender roles. It means that women during that time were expected to be pure. And I say pure like this because we know that that concept really changed a lot in our time. So, well, they were expected to be pure until marriage, and they cannot show any sexual behavior because that was considered promiscuous. Also, they were socially repressed, and they were not allowed to be sexual beings. Men always had the power over women, but also they have to fix into that masculine role in the society, which means that they cannot be able to cry or to show any kind of weakness in front of anyone. Well, before we start seeing gender and sexuality theory in Dracula's characters, we want to tell you a little bit about the beginning of this amazing book for you to go and read it. And if you have read it, just to recommend this book to one of your friends, or maybe this video or something that you like. So this book starts when Jonathan Harker, who is a lawyer, goes to Transylvania to conclude a real estate transaction with Dracula. So he was like doing all of the process and everything, but then he realized that he was a prisoner in Dracula's castle and that really weird and strange things were happening there. So we are going to show you just some spoilers in this gender and sexuality theory in Dracula's characters, but don't worry because the whole story is much better, so we recommend you to read it. So let's start.
Okay, so we are going to start with this analysis of Dracula's characters. So for this presentation, we used some images and scenes from Dracula's movie. This movie is from 1992, and it was directed by Francis Ford. So this is also a recommendation for you to watch the movie and, well, of course, to read the book. Well, we decided to divide this analysis into two parts, the women analysis and the men analysis. So we are going to start with the women part. So first we have Mina Harker. She's one of the main characters, of course. She's Jonathan Harker's fiance, and well, she embraces completely the Victorian woman. She's pure and ideal, as Angie was mentioning before. She was also sexually repressed, as she wasn't aware of her body or what she could do, but she was kind of waiting to Jonathan to do that part. So basically, she was all that Victorian society expected to see in a girl. But on the other side, we have Lucy Westenra. She's Mina's best friend. She's a little bit different from her. Well, first, she owns a lot of money. Mina is from another social class, but Lucy also breaks some standards from the Victorian era, as she is aware of her body, of what she can do, but she's also kind of waiting for her to be married. But this is the human Lucy, because after that she suffers some kind of liberation thanks to vampirehood. But we are going to talk about this later. First, we are going to watch a movie scene where we can see Mina and Lucy, and we can see some difference between them. So let's check this out.
Diary, 30th of May, 1897. I know that Jonathan does not want me to stay here with Lucy while he is away. He thinks that if I become accustomed to the wealth and privileges of the Westenra family, I will not be content as the wife of a mere clerk in a law firm. But Lucy and I have been friends since we were children, and she has never minded that I am only a schoolmistress.
Oh, disgustingly awful.
Oh, Mina, you're always working. Is your ambitious John Harker forcing you to learn that ridiculous machine? When he could be forcing you to perform unspeakable acts of desperate passion on the parlor floor.
Lucy, really, you shouldn't talk about my fiancé in such a way. There's more to marriage than carnal pleasures.
Oh, Mina. So I see. Much, much more.
Oh,
That's...
What is it, Lucy? Because I don't understand it.
can man and woman really do
That.
I did. Only last night.
Fibber, you did not.
Yes, I did. Well, in my dreams. Jonathan measures up, doesn't he? You can tell Lucy.
We've kissed, that's all. He thinks he's too poor to marry me. And it's all the worse now that I'm here visiting you at Hillingham, my rich friend.
Yes, but not even one marriage proposal. And here I am, almost 20. Practically a hag.
Okay, now that we saw this scene, it is possible to see how different they are. Because Mina, as I said, she's sexually repressed, but Lucy has a different view about this issue. So this is the first difference that we have. Also, here we can read a quote about human Mina. She says, this is in chapter 8. So she says, some of the new women writers will someday start an idea that men and women should be allowed to see each other asleep before proposing or accepting. But I suppose the new woman won't condescend in future to accept. She will do the proposing herself, and a nice job she will make of it too. There's some consolation in that. So here in this quote, we can see the conception of the new woman, and we see Mina criticizing that kind of girls. So the new woman was Angie was mentioning before. They were kind of challenging the femininity from that age, as they wanted to get divorced, get the custody of their children. They didn't like that domestic atmosphere. They were also sexually liberated, so they were a challenge for society at that time, and Mina was criticizing that. But even though with vampirehood, she suffers a kind of liberation that she didn't like at the beginning, and you can see that in the book and in the movie as well. But we also have Lucy, as I said before, and Lucy was different from Mina at the beginning, but when she becomes a vampire, she also changes and leaves behind that ideal woman and becomes the new woman herself. So we have this quote from Vampire Lucy on chapter 16, and this is about Lucy. So they were saying that Lucy's eyes in form and color, but Lucy's eyes unclean and full of hellfire, instead of the pure, gentle orbs we knew. So here we see that change from the ideal Victorian woman to the new woman thanks to vampirehood. They see how they are not poor and pure anymore, but they are different now. But also here is where I want to talk about Freud's theory, since Freud's proposed 5 stages of psychosexual development: the oral, anal, phallic, latent, and genital stage. So here I want to talk about the phallic stage, because Lucy is seen as a phallic instrument in this book. So the phallic stage, according to Freud, happens from the maybe 3 to 6 years old in children, and this is related to masturbation, when they start to know their bodies. And the reason why Lucy is considered a phallic instrument is because in this stage, the superego is developed, and the superego is the one in charge of controlling impulses and trying to follow rules. Yes, so we see that because Lucy is the instrument, and Arthur, who was kind of in love with her, is the one who suffers this stage, as he's the one who kills Lucy, and she dies in a completely sexualized way, since Arthur kind of penetrates her body with a stake in her heart. But this is seen as something phallic because he's trying to control his impulses, on not trying to take away her pure ideal. So he suffers this phallic stage, and Lucy is a phallic instrument here. As she is a vampire, the men from that era still see her as the pure woman that she was before.
So, my friends, we fight not one beast, but legions that go on age after age after age, feeding on the blood of the living.
Quickly, hide, now! Lucy! Lucy!
to me, Arthur. Leave these others and come to me. My arms are hungry for you, my darling. Kiss me and caress me, my darling husband, please.
Holy blood! We're strong in the Lord! In the power of his might! We're strong in the Lord! In the power of his might! The power of God is upon us! We're strong in the Lord and the power of his might! We're strong in the Lord and the power of his might! We're strong in the Lord and the power of his might! Ex umbris in luce! I bring you from shadow into light! I cast you out, the prince of darkness, into hell!
A moment's courage and it is done. Take the stick in your left hand. Place the point over the heart. Then in God's name strike. Do it now!
We also have the new woman represented in the Weird Sisters. These sisters are Dracula's daughters. They are at their service all the time, and as they are vampires, they have already suffered that transformation and that liberation, and they are seen as something non-natural because society expected purity, and they are not pure at all. They show how sex and vampirism are completely related, and they show the power of women over men, but we are going to see this later on when we approach Jonathan Harker. For now, we only have this quote about them. It says, "There was something about them that made me uneasy. Some longing and at the same time some deadly fear and desire that they will kiss me with those red lips. It is not good to note this down, lest someday it should meet Mina's eyes and cause her pain, but it is the truth." So this happens in chapter 3 when Jonathan meet these sisters, and this is a description from Jonathan about them, how they have that power over men that the pure Mina doesn't have yet. So this is how the new sisters embrace that new woman and that liberation, that independence from men, and they are actually sexually aware of their bodies and of what they can do.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Aleja. So to continue with this analysis, we have now men. So to begin with, we have Jonathan Harker. He is seen as a feminized hero. He is a devoted husband, but he also falls into temptation. As you were mentioning, Aleja, this man is like loving Mina. Of course, he is in love with her, but he also falls into temptation with these weird sisters. We're going to see that later on in a scene from the movie. And this is very important, the part that he's objective and rational. Why? Because he is the representation of the industrialization of that time that Bram Stoker portrays. As I was mentioning at the beginning, it is very important to recognize this, because this man was not doing what, let's say, everyone does, because he was not, when he felt prisoner in the castle, he was not just seeing things in the castle like looking around, but instead, and quotation there, it says, "I went on to make a thorough examination of the various stairs and passages." It happens in chapter 3, before he met the weird sisters. And as I'm mentioning, he's not just like looking around like, hey, where is this and where is this? No, he's examining everything. We have in here the scene, so we are going to see this, and then we are going to talk about the quotations that we have in here.
Okay, so as I was mentioning before, these are the weird sisters, and this scene actually shows that power they have over men through their liberation and, well, through actually a sexual encounter. So this is how the new woman is portrayed in vampirehood.
Yeah, Aleja, thank you so much. And having all of that in mind, we have to see that, as Aleja is mentioning, women now have the power over men, which is like very contradictory for this time. And we can see that through this quotation from chapter 3. So it says, "Then the skin of my throat began to tingle as one's flesh does when the hand that is to tickle it approaches nearer. I could feel the soft, shivering touch of the lips on the super sensitive skin of my throat, and the hard dents of two sharp teeth just touching and pausing there. I closed my eyes in a languorous ecstasy and waited with beating heart." So in here we can see the power that these weird sisters were having into Jonathan, but also we have to see how Bram Stoker is portraying this sexual encounter by just like describing a biting that they were doing into Jonathan's body, and how he was in an ecstasy. He was feeling very good. He was like feeling that liberation, but because women were doing that to him, he was feeling that liberation, but no because of him, like because of himself, but because of the weird sisters. Also, we have this quotation that says, "I am alone in the castle with those awful women. For Mina is a woman, and there is naught in common. They are devils of the pit." So after he was having that ecstasy, after he was having all of that encounter, he realized that he was alone in that castle, and he was like having that kind of debate inside him, because he saw that weird sisters as awful women because they were the contrary of Mina, but at the same time we can see that they were very attractive to him because of their liberation, and they were very, very confident with their bodies and with their things. So it is like a debate that Jonathan was having. Like he was like, okay, I like it, but I don't like it because they are awful women, because they are different from my wife Mina. Okay, now we have the Crew of Light. This is like a crew that was created to defeat Dracula, and we have 4 characters in here. First of all, we have Van Helsing. He's a Dutch professor that is described by his pupil Dr. Seward as a philosopher and metaphysician and one of the most advanced scientists of his day. This is very important because through this character, Van Helsing, and also through Dr. Seward, we can see that scientific progress and what Aleja mentioned at the beginning, that science versus superstition, because they have to defeat superstition, which is Dracula himself. We have quotes that can show us how they, like men, were seeing women in that era. So, for example, when Mina is turned into a vampire, he says, "Mina has a man's brain, a brain that a man should have were he much gifted, and a woman's heart. The good God fashioned her for a purpose. Believe me, when he made that so good combination." It means that Mina, well, as she was a vampire, she was suffering that liberation. So it means that she was like a mix of man and women, because she was like, okay, she has like the brain of the man, but the heart of a woman. It's like she was not changed that much. She was like suffering that liberation, but through the eyes of the doctor, she has a man's brain. Also, we have some things that happen to Van Helsing, because he also falls into temptation with the weird sisters, because as we are mentioning, they were like very attractive to men, because they were like very liberated and they know what they were doing with their bodies. So it says, then the beautiful eyes of the fair woman open and look lost, and the voluptuous mouth present to a kiss, and the man is weak. So we can see here how Bram Stoker breaks a little bit with that gender thing about men being weak and women being like liberated and not sexual repressed. We also have Dr. Seward. He was a talented young doctor, and he is the administrator of an insane asylum not far from Dracula's English home. And we can see that this doctor says, women were all in tears now. There was no resisting them, and we wept openly. In chapter 23. So it means that in here we have like also a contradictory thing about gender, because men were like crying because of something that happened that we are not going to tell you, and they were like crying because it was so sad for them, so they can break that thing about not being weak and not crying in front of anyone. And it was like very different to have that in the Victorian era. And also he was one of the characters that show this industrialization too, and this scientific progress. Well, he is a doctor first, and second, he kept his diary in a phonograph, which is a different way of communication. And also he says, why not advance science in its most difficult and vital aspect, the knowledge of the brain? Had I even the secret of one such mind? So we can see that here Bram Stoker was like breaking those conceptions about science and religion and well, everything that was happening in that time. We also have Queen's Morris and Arthur Homewood. In here is very important Arthur, because even though he was like having that debate that Aleja was mentioning before, even though he was like thinking like Lucy was very pure and everything, and he was like debating inside himself like if he had to kill her or not, he at the end did it. So it means that even though it is like the break of the gender and things, at the end he had the power over Lucy. So yeah, it is like kind of contradictory, but okay. Finally, we have Count Dracula. This is like a very different character of that time, because well, first of course he wants power and conquest. He admires human creation, so he was like very fascinated about humans in general. It means that he had undefined sexual preferences. So he's the character that really breaks gender and sexual normatives of the era. He showed like, hey, if you're a man, you can be with a woman or with a man or whatever you want, and backwards. It means that he was not like having some preferences, or he was not like following that traditional gender roles. So we have a quotation here of a sexual meeting that he had with Nina, and it says, with his left hand, he held both Mrs. Harker's hands, keeping them away with her arms at full tension. His right hand gripped her by the back of the neck, forcing her face down on his bosom. Her white nightdress was smeared with blood, and a thin stream trickled down the man's bare breast, which was shown by his torn open dress. So as we can see here, it is like the sexual meeting that they were having, and it is very descriptive, and it also plays with blood, and like it sexualized also blood, as they were both vampires in that time, in that moment. it is like they were very, very, very enthusiastic and like very enjoying the moment with the blood, and it is like very contradictory to show that in the Victorian era, like to show that description of the sexual act and that description of the blood and all of those things.
Drink and join me in eternal life. No, oh, I cannot let this be.
Please, I don't care. Make me.
Mary, you'll be cursed as I am to walk in the shadow of death for all eternity. I love you too much to continue.
Take me away from all this death.
Okay, so to close a little bit this analysis, we saw the pure woman and the new woman, and how sex became an issue during the Victorian era as women started to become aware of their bodies. And we also saw in men how they liked that liberation, but they were scared at the same time, and as they preferred the pure woman, but they were also tempted by the new ones. So we see how this worked in the Victorian era. As I said, this was the vision of the woman that men had. So they wanted the pure one, but they also wanted the new one, but they were scared of both, and that liberation, they didn't know what to choose. So this is what happens in Dracula and what happened during the Victorian era. We also see here how Bram Stoker portrays gender. As Angie mentioned, we see how he portrays men as weak, as someone that can cry. That was something very unusual from that time. And well, we see women in a completely different way that the Victorian society expected. So this is what we had to say, what we had to analyze from these characters. We hope you like the analysis, the movie scenes. You are of course encouraged to watch the movies, to read this amazing Gothic novel, and well, see you this Friday on our debate.
And as it says in here, I want you to believe in things that you cannot. So thank you so much for your attention. Thank you so much for everything, and see you on Friday.
Thank you. Bye.